all of the protests across the country really started at Columbia University. These are war protests against what Israel's been doing in Gaza. The Gaza war started by Hamas on October 7th. So we decided to go to talk to the students at Columbia University about what's been going on, both the protests and also the university crackdown. And just to sort of set this up, and I want to be perfectly clear, we interviewed about 25 members of the Columbia University community, faculty, students, staff, professors. We spoke with dozens of others off camera. And then there were, frankly, countless members of the community who did not want to talk to us at all. But to be clear, we did not actually manage to go on campus. Instead, we had to catch people at the one entrance that is open, and that is at 116th in Amsterdam, for all of you who are familiar with Morningside Heights. This is the one gate that police have essentially set up for people to go in and out. Here's some video here. Police are only allowing students and staff with IDs to go through, so journalists have to try and catch people going in and out. And when the activists want to speak to the media, or when they want to relay what's being said on the bullhorns on the other side of that fence, they also have to come outside. And that frequently turns things into a big scrum, as you can see. In any case, from our interviews and our reporting, there are a couple of clear things that have emerged about the protests and about the seething emotions on campus. And first of all, everybody we spoke with got the most animated about the university crackdowns on free speech. By all accounts, the university's heavy-handed response turned what had been relatively quiet, peaceful, small protests against the Gaza war into something far angrier and bigger.
There were just a couple of students on the South Lawn, but once the police actually intervened, then students actually became mobilized.
I think a lot of the more, extreme violent stuff has been coming outside of campus and has been only a minority. So when Fox News says it's like a pro-Hamas encampment, I don't think that's true. I think you're blowing out of proportion.
Faculty who disagree in many ways on the underlying issues of what's going on in Israel and Gaza, the politics of the protest itself, have just been really dismayed by the fact that there's been no consultation, no communication even from the administration about this, massive escalation.
So I am connected in the sense that I am half Palestinian, yes.
And what do you make of what's been happening on campus?
It's just very unfortunate, and it got to a place that it shouldn't have got to, too fast, too much. It could have been completely avoided.
A lot of people are talking about the student occupation of Hamilton Hall, which then there was windows that were smashed, and then the university said that police should come in and clear it, which they did in mass, climbing through some of the windows.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth, as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's going to make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you. Thank you.
The students, every one of them that we spoke with, said that all of this could have been avoided had the university engaged in some dialogue and discussions, that there was no reason to have to escalate this in the way that the university did. But in any case, we found a lot of people who had different views of the war in Gaza who were united in condemning the university administration for what they saw as a heavy-handed crackdown. The other theme that has been pretty clear, and that everybody we spoke with, students and faculty, said that there have been incidents of religious hatred at these protests and on campus, but everybody said that these incidents have been isolated.
I think anti-Semitism is real, and I do think it's on campus. I also think that mentioning Islamophobia doesn't negate that.
To focus on one or two incidents of legitimate anti-Semitism and projecting it to the entire student movement would be a gross mischaracterization of what's going on here.
Are you supportive of Hamas?
I am not supportive of Hamas, no.
Do you support Hamas?
I do not support Hamas, no, at all. And I know that there are figures on the left that support Hamas very blindly and very ignorantly.
I did see some Jewish students also getting hurt in the process.
The concerns of people on all sides of this conflict are sincere. The concerns of the protesters are sincere. The concerns of some Jewish students who said they were unsafe are sincere. But the way a social movement works, if you crack down on it, it gets bigger, and that should have been anticipated.
I find myself flip-flopping every day because I do want to protest the wrongdoings of Israel, but I do wonder why aren't people my age mobilized this way for, the tons of other issues like the Russia-Ukraine war or abortion. I was really hoping that when Roe was struck down that we would have this big movement for taking back our bodily autonomy.
The concern about priorities came up a lot with a lot of different people, but to be clear, we did not find a single student, faculty, anybody that we spoke with who had anything but disgust for the massacre on October 7th and for the loss of innocent civilians in Gaza since then. The divide seemed to be over essentially who was to blame. And to the credit of a lot of students, Cenk and John, many of them said this was far too complex for some of them to talk about. Many students said that, look, we don't want to talk to you because we don't know enough about the issue in order to render an informed opinion. But everybody seemed to have an opinion about the university's crackdown, which by all accounts made things a lot worse and seemed to intensify and essentially pour fuel on the fire. Cenk?
Yeah, so based on your reporting, David, based on folks I know at Columbia, I'm pretty sure I know what happened, and it's all confirmed by what you just said there. Look, guys, we have to break this down in a couple of different ways. Number one, whose perspective are we talking about? And then number two, what were the reactions and actions in the different stages? So number one, for students, were there Jewish students who were genuinely concerned about anti-Semitism on campus? Yes, genuinely, okay? Were there Muslim students who were genuinely concerned about anti-Muslim comments? Yes, definitely. Okay, so those are all legitimate and genuine. So those are the students. Then you move to the faculty, and the faculty were basically livid that the administration did not check with them before they sent the cops in. Because according to Columbia rules, they must check with the faculty. So it was a gross violation of what happened. Those rules were set up after 1968 because the faculty wanted a bigger say in, hey, are you cracking down on our students? Are you making this an unsafe place, et cetera? And the person who leads Columbia did not check with them. She checked with her donors that are the alumni, and she decided that she was gonna crack down to try to save her own job. That's my analysis, and that's why she didn't bother checking with the faculty. The faculty are definitely correct, no matter what the faculty would have said about the protests, right? And then the third factor is the factor that almost no one talks about, and I think is by far the most important, which is how the media and politicians reacted to what's happening. Because let's say that there was, you can pick a number, 2 or 3, 7, 12, 18, I don't mind whichever number it is. But from what it sounds like, it was at a bare minimum even in terms of idiots saying something against Jewish students and idiots saying things against Muslim students. So you could take those comments, let's say there was 10 of them, right? 10's a big number, right? And you could say, look at these comments against the Muslim students. The Muslim students are under attack. They're under attack. You have to arrest everyone on the pro-Israel side. Or you could say, the Jewish students are under attack. They're under attack. You have to arrest everyone on the pro-peace, pro-Palestinian side. And the media chose. Or you could say, hey man, stop it. A bunch of knuckleheads out there saying this or saying that. And by the way, that's the tactic I've taken my entire life. As a Muslim in America, have I gotten racist, bigoted talk against me out in public in 100 different ways? Yes. Did I then go, that's it, I'm shutting down all protests that disagree with me about anything because I'm under assault? So you can tell my sense of it, my analysis of it is that the media and the politicians chose to only focus on one side and take something that could be genuinely concerning to students, faculty, and the Columbia community overall and decide, no, whether that was a molehill or whatever it was, we're gonna turn it into Mount Everest. And we're gonna do it for an agenda. So that's the part we could discuss. The agenda is shut down all protests of Israel. Enough with this crap. Israel's not gonna get protests in America. So we'll come back to that because that's opinion, okay? Now in terms of the different stages, again here, when we get back to facts, rather than analysis, again, there's no question on some of the facts. So number one, David's confirming here, same thing, exact thing I heard. Until the media came in and the president went to Congress and got yelled at, et cetera, and she ordered the cops in, campus was really calm. And in fact, when they started doing the arrest, people were shocked. They were like, what? It's like, for us, what we see on TV is, oh, I saw a video here and I saw a video there, and it looks like mayhem and chaos, and oh, it's about time they crack down. Not at all true. So they could, bad video here, bad video there, outside of campus, maybe one inside, a couple inside, whatever it is. But there was no sense of mayhem at all, Perfectly calm. In fact, if you went on an average day, you would be intensely bored at those protests. And all of a sudden, this giant crackdown happens. The cops come in, and now all of a sudden, we went from a normal set of people on college campus protesting an important issue to a giant national showdown. And then some people start coming in, etc. And then the third layer of it is when they went into Hamilton Hall. And that was an active decision, and that's one we could debate whether they should have gone in or shouldn't have gone in, and did that make it worse or did it not? And you could say, hey, that one's on the protesters going inside Hamilton Hall. That's a different level. Again, we could agree or disagree, but at least you understand that the protesters actually did take that action, and then we could discuss whether they were right or not. So before we go to John, putting aside my analysis about media and politicians driving this, David, do you think I got any of the facts wrong based on the people that you talked to?
No, I think that's essentially it. I mean, it was calm, it was peaceful. All of a sudden, students and faculty were outraged by the fact that police came in on April 18th and cleared out what had been a peaceful protest, and things. All of a sudden, this protest that had been about the Gaza war morphed into an explosive protest about free speech. And Cenk, you had people who admit that they were out there joining the protest, not because they don't know anything about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and some of them don't want to know, but they felt like regardless of what I know or don't know, we have a right to protest anything on this campus. And the idea that the university would unilaterally make this decision without consulting experts, their own experts, there are experts in the field, as you heard in that setup piece. There are people there who know that social movements intensify when you crack down on them. Did the university administration consult with the professors who are experts on social movements to say, hey, let's game this out, what's gonna happen? No. And so people were so bewildered and so frustrated that the administration would make this decision in such a heavy-handed way without communicating to staff, to faculty, or students. This protest essentially morphed from being a Gaza war protest to a free speech protest.
Yeah, and there was one of the women that you interviewed, I don't know if she was a student or staff or faculty, but she said sort of a similar thing, like, how did they not see that this was gonna happen if you crack down? And I think that's an interesting question. I don't think that we should assume that they didn't know, or that even in knowing that that was able to be the thing that drives their action. And not every group, I think, has the same calculus. If you're talking about like the administration, the president, they've been brought before Congress who doesn't give a damn about any of this. They want heads to roll because it makes them look better, they think. And so they put the fear of God into the president of Colombia and send her back. And she's terrified that she's gonna lose her position, that she's gonna have to resign like so many others are. So even if she's thinking that it might escalate the protest to crack down on them, what's the alternative? You do nothing, you're forced to resign, I guess. You have that sort of individual fear. And for Congress, like I'm talking about the Republicans specifically, Stefanik and Fox and Johnson and all that, they literally went there to stir things up. They know that it's going to intensify things. They don't care because they think that chaos will make them look better. They're not interested in the students. They're not interested in the concern over civilian lives or whatever. These are pieces on a chessboard that they're attempting to put in the position necessary for Donald Trump to win in November. And so I think there've been a lot of factors that influence these different protests. But when you have like Josh Hawley like talking about sending the National Guard in, and you have senators flooding Fox News about crackdown here, crackdown there, are they all unaware of the fact that this is gonna make things worse, or do they want to make things worse?
No,
No?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, John, but my sense of it is, no, they're used to, the establishment gets whatever the hell it wants, okay? And if we're driving an agenda, we're driving the agenda, and they're not used to online media. All these years, they still haven't gotten used to online media and how things are gonna bubble up, etc. Because in the old days, what would have happened is exactly what's happened on cable news and mainstream media, but there would have been no other reporting. There would have been no Young Turks, there would have been no David Schuster at Columbia, there would have been no other viral videos showing pro-Israel protesters attacking the UCLA students, etc. And so they would have just told everybody, these are all dirty anti-Semites who are causing massive problems, and the Jewish kids were all in grave danger, and we had to shut down these Palestinian Muslim supporting pro-terrorists. And you've seen them do it 100 times. We saw them do it in the Iraq War. We see them doing it here, and you see it on Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, comparing peace protesters that David just described as perfectly calm for the great majority of them, etc., as either pro-terrorist on Fox News or Nazis on CNN, right? So,
but they are doing that.
Yeah,
and I would argue
and
they want to be able to do that.
Here's the irony. You have Jewish students who told us that they were mad at Fox News and some of those on the right because they felt that the Jewish students were being used by the right, not because people on the right care about protecting Jews and protecting against anti-Semitism, but because they were using this in order to further a political goal. And the other part about this that I'll say is that one of the students spoke to us and said that there was an effort early on to have essentially a teach-in in the protest about anti-Semitism so that people could understand what is the language, why are Jews sensitive to certain language? And one of the things that came out in one of these early teach-ins is that when protesters say, we are protesting Netanyahu, we are protesting Netanyahu's military decisions. We are not protesting Israel. That's a distinction that Jews are like, yeah, most Jews don't like Netanyahu. Most Israelis don't like Netanyahu. And then you're moving it away from hatred of an entire country. Students were learning this sort of thing until the university came in and exacerbated things and turned this into such an inferno that all of these efforts to try to slowly help people understand with teach-ins and seminars and discussions, that went out the window.
Yeah. So I want to build on what David's saying there because there's the Netanyahu-Israel distinction, great distinction. Dick Cheney, for example, does not represent all Americans. Yes, he was our vice president that controlled our policy, but that doesn't mean all Americans signed on to it. But there's a second distinction too, which is between Israel and Jewish Americans or Jews at all, right? Just because something claims to be the Jewish state doesn't mean they represent everyone in that religion, right? Saudi Arabia claims to be a Muslim state. That doesn't mean they represent 1.6 billion Muslims, well, actually the great majority of whom are in Indonesia, India, and Pakistan. So, and you could love Jewish people or just think that they're equal to everyone else as a rational thing to do, right? But say I'm bothered by the government of Israel, whether they call themselves a Jewish state or not. Every government does things wrong. So it's, in my opinion, it's totally, utterly absurd to say that if you criticize Israel, that means you don't like Jewish people. Well, does that mean any government just can say, oh, I declare myself a Buddhist government? That's it. You just can't criticize me at all, otherwise you're racist against Buddhists. So those are interesting, important distinctions, but they're lost in the #1 factor in all of this, in my opinion, which is the media coverage. So if you took a couple of needles, again, pick a number, 12 against Muslims, 12 against Jews on Columbia campus, or 24 in this direction, 13 in that direction, whatever it is, and you took that needle and you made it a haystack, well, the act of making it a haystack is the actual problem, right? So that's what a lot of people are talking past each other. Because when I talk about, for example, why is the media focusing on this? What's the actual agenda, et cetera? People think, oh, so you don't believe students who said this stuff. And I'm like, no, you guys are not getting it. On the campus, it's completely different. They're having interesting conversations, or at least they were, having interesting conversations about, hey, what are the boundaries? What can people say? Does one person saying something or 3 people saying something represent the whole crowd? How do we make sure it doesn't represent? They're having really smart, interesting conversations at Columbia, at UCLA, and all these campuses, and 99% of which are perfectly peaceful. But then, so when I talk about the agenda and narrative, who's driving it and why? That goes to John's question, right? First of all, there's nothing coordinated. That's people who say that don't understand how the world works. Everybody just drives in their own self-interest and usually with no brakes in the car at all. So Elise Stefanik, for example, her agenda is get famous, get publicity, get donations from being wildly unfair. It doesn't matter, okay? There isn't anything that any of those college presidents could have done that would have satiated Elise Stefanik. So she's a bad faith actor, and multiply that by about a minimum 300 people in Congress. So Congress is driving in a super bad faith direction, and everybody gets that. And then at Columbia, you have the alumni like Robert Kraft as an example. And you can have alumni from a lot of different places, different backgrounds, different agendas, even within the same background. You think all Muslim alumni agree on all the issues at Columbia or even this issue? No way, right? There's a giant range of people. But a guy like Robert Kraft, he thinks, I don't want these protests. He said that publicly, that's why I'm using him as an example. Now, is he genuine that he's really worried about Jewish students? Maybe, he really might be, okay? And or could it be that he thinks, protesting Israel. And by the way, it might be not just, hey, protesting Israel's out of bounds. He might think protesting Israel is anti-Semitic. A lot of older folks do think that. And they think, I'm not allowing it. I'm not allowing anti-Semitism, so I'm gonna stop all my donations. The minute he says he's stopping all his donations, everybody's gonna freak out. Like that's just the real world of the administrators and what they care about. So this whole thing got enormously perverted by all of these. So, but I have one last thing for David here.
Sure.
Were there any pro-Israel protesters there or no?
There weren't pro-Israel protesters. And in fact, we spoke to a guy who he was mad. He said, people should remember how this started October 7th. And I said, okay, but what about, isn't it possible to both condemn what happened on October 7th and be angry, as most Jews and most Israelis are, about the Netanyahu response and to feel that that has been excessive? And he very quickly pivoted and said, of course, I believe that there should be no civilians killed, no innocents should die. And so the commonality that we sort of found, even from pro-Israel protesters and people who were Jewish who had some concerns, is they said, we hate, it's embarrassing to us, it's horrifying to us that innocent Palestinians are being killed. We just want to know, is there going to be some equity and the same sort of standards held for Israel and held for other situations? And oh, by the way, it's not helped, of course, by people who are ignorant about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, who are suddenly, taking up sides across the spectrum. So, but yes, there were pro-Israel supporters. I asked them specifically, Cenk, about what had happened in Los Angeles, where supposedly a Jewish student got knocked unconscious, and then 200 pro-Israel supporters or pro-Netanyahu supporters, whatever you want to say, then rushed into the Palestinian compound and started ripping it apart and throwing punches. He hated that. He said that was unacceptable. And he aligned himself with the Jewish, I believe, Hillel president at UCLA, who quickly condemned that and said that doesn't represent Jewish values. Most of the people, Cenk, whether you're supporting the Israeli war and the right to sort of hit back Hamas, or you're more horrified by what's happening in the humanitarian disaster, everybody, the commonality seems to be innocent people being killed is wrong. It's disturbing, it's horrifying. And there should be a way that we can all talk about that and accept the complexities and nuances of the discussion. But media, as you know, mainstream media does not do nuances and complexities. Everything is down to bumper stickers, which is why people get misled.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify real quick on that Jewish girl being knocked unconscious. It never got verified. It was the video starts after she's already fallen down. I looked and looked for mainstream media articles that clarified it in either direction, and they didn't. But that's exactly the point. Somebody puts out a video that is not confirmed. Nobody knows what actually happened, and then people genuinely get worried, right? And then they show up to protect people, right? And then we've got a bigger mess. And what's driving all of this? It's the media coverage rather than the actual events. Because people get so mad based on what they think is happening. But the bottom line,
or they get so afraid, as the university president Columbia did, based on false media coverage. She's not out there on the yard looking to see what's actually going on. She's getting reports, and she's getting tremendous pressure from alumni. So yes, I think you're spot on. The media and the social media world that we live in now, where you can literally find any sort of clips or snippets to validate and confirm whatever sort of bias you have and whatever predisposition you have, that is exacerbating things. And as a result, it's putting incredible pressure on university leaders right now who feel like, well, the media is telling me this has happened. I can believe the media, or I can believe my students. What do I do? Well, in the case of Hamilton Hall, the escape hatch for the university president was to say, they're outside agitators who are storming Hamilton Hall. That's why we're going to crack down. Well, no, the students say no, these were not outside agitators. These were students who were really angry. But the university president is looking for an out, even with her own community.
Yeah, and clarification on that, NBC News reported there was only one outside agitator in Hamilton Hall that was among their arrests. And the bottom line is, no matter what you think of what the students did at any of these colleges, and I don't know how anybody would know what all of the students at all of these colleges did, the bottom line result is every protest against Israel on college campuses have now been shut down, and the people who were doing the protesting have been arrested. So I'll end on my opinion on that, which is it is outrageous. It is 100% against freedom of speech. And now, if you go and protest against Israel because of the media and political demagoguery, you're probably going to get called names, as you're going to see later in the program. They're saying that they're now scanning the faces of the people who went to protest. People like Kevin O'Leary are saying, you're never going to get hired in this town again. So is there massive suppression of protests against Israel? Yes, definitely. Whether you think it's legitimate or not legitimate, You can decide that for yourself, but you just got the facts on what's actually happening on the ground. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.